Welcome to PAREV-TV. Our guest today is Raffi Elliott, an Armenian civic activist born and raised in Montreal, Canada. His mother is Armenian, his father is Canadian. He is a graduate of University of Ottawa with a degree in political science. Raffi moved to Armenia in 2012, where he completed his master's in international relations at the American University of Armenia, and subsequently became a web entrepreneur. He has since settled in Yerevan with his wife, Mariam, and his two children, Maral and Aram. And today, Rafi is known for his journalistic contributions, and he is a political analyst in Armenia. Rafi, last 100 days, not 44 days, have been hectic for both Armenians in Armenia, Karabakh, and the diaspora. What stands out? How can you capsule the recent past?
Well, as you say, it was quite hectic in Armenia, of course. Before the war, we were dealing with the COVID situation as the rest of the world. So for all those people who, on December 31st were saying, thank God 2020 is over, and that was the worst year of their lives, for us, we had the same as everybody else, plus, a catastrophic war. But since then, as I think most people, both in Armenia and in the diaspora, understand that the Karabakh issue has been for Armenians an existential one, an identitarian conflict, and much of our post-Soviet, modern identity was built on the foundation of victory over in the previous conflict, and so for a lot of people, it's coming to terms with the new reality that transpired. Of course, the irony is that I think most people in the back of their minds knew that this was always a possibility that we probably chose to ignore. But I think that what's going on now in Armenia, the reassessment, is actually quite, it may not look like it now, but I think it's quite positive for Armenia, because we're forced to accept certain realities and learn how to ensure that these circumstances never happen again. And really, that will be the silver lining at the end of this current crisis of faith.
Rafi, as you know, there is always this blame game. Everybody points the finger at the other person, forgetting that four fingers point towards you. As you point one finger towards the other, four fingers point towards you, and each one of us has a responsibility. What do you make out of this blame game? Can Pashinyan continue?
There's that famous Kennedy quote that he said after the Bay of Pigs invasion, where victory has many fathers and defeat is an orphan. And we've definitely seen this in Armenia now. Pashinyan has been accused of trying to deflect blame, although he has on many occasions said that as the head of government, although the de facto head of state, he takes responsibility but not blame for the events. Many of the generals have called on him to resign, which others have pointed out as being somewhat ironic because they were the ones actually running the war, and many people during the war were actually felt that, at least because Pashinyan doesn't have a military background, and the fact that he had handed over the day-to-day decision making to the Joint Chiefs of Staff was a good thing. But now, after the war, it's his fault, right? It's an interesting sort of turn of events. But of course, the reality is that this is a failure. Pashinyan shares some amount of the blame. The generals share certainly their share. But this is a failure of governance going back decades. and it's a lack of vision of the global Armenian community as well. It's a bit unfortunate that we mobilized as a nation the day after this war started, and then all of that unity ended with the ceasefire. This is not sustainable nation building.
How can you keep that fire alight? How do you keep that energy moving? Of unity, of working together, of taking things seriously. How do you keep that?
Well, I think there's a certain reality that maybe most people would not like to admit, but the truth is that the fire usually stays burning as only with a much smaller percentage of the population. There's always only a small group of dedicated people, and then there's many others who will bandwagon at when it's necessary. They will get sucked in with the wave of emotion, and then they will return to the rest of their lives. And this is not unique to Armenians, of course. This is just human nature. And for those of us who are,
who is this little kiddo?
Well, this is my daughter Maral. Maral, you want to say hi?
Hi, Maral.
I think the reality is that what we should be looking, those of us who are concerned with the long-term sustainability of the Armenian nation, should be more interested in substance or quality over quantity. We don't need millions of part-time Armenian patriots. We need hundreds of thousands of full-time Armenian patriots. And of course, patriotism is broadly defined in this case, which could mean many things. And amongst Armenians, I think there's always this competition, where people want to prove just how devoted they are to the Armenian cause, and that's really unnecessary. Everybody does their part, each according to their means, right? But I think so long as most Armenians around the world recognize, and hopefully this war lit something amongst most of us to understand that the survival of the Armenian state is not a given. It requires our input. Again, to quote another U.S. President, Thomas Jefferson, the tree of liberty is sometimes requires to be replenished with the blood of patriots and tyrants, right? And this is the reality of Armenia. I'm from Canada, and I'm trying to explain to some of my Canadian relatives what it means to be a patriot when the demand of you as a patriot is the ultimate one, which then for some members of my Armenian family meant to give their lives, which they did proudly. But every Armenian doesn't necessarily have to be a soldier. These people fight for the rest of us to live. So the true future for Armenia is to build a country where those of us who aren't patriots will want to live in anyway, because that's what really everybody wants to do. It's you want to build a country that your children will want to live in, they want to invest in.
Rafi, yesterday the trilateral meeting took place in Moscow. Pashinyan was there, Aliyev, and they visited Putin. And a lot was discussed, nothing solid. And one thing which is very, very sensitive, very important for Armenians, I guess every people, is the question of prisoners. What is the mood? What is the latest you hear about that? And why was there no agreement reached on that issue?
So yeah, the issue of POWs is extremely sensitive for Armenians, especially because we've seen the evidence that the Azeris themselves have been publishing on the internet of what has been happening to some of those POWs, be they civilian or military. We know that there are at least 64 Armenian POWs currently in Azeri captivity that we know of, but there may be more. and it's already been 2 months since the war has ended. Azerbaijan has returned 44 of them last month in exchange for some Azeri prisoners. And obviously, this is the top priority for the Armenian government. I know that some people seem to be of the impression that because Armenia hasn't managed to secure their release yet, it's somehow the result of a lack of effort on the Armenian government side, but that is simply untrue uh, because, I mean, I can't think of something more important to deal with right now. But the reality is, we also need to accept that the negotiations that have been taking place since the armistice are not one in which the Armenian side is being outwitted by more clever negotiators. Right? It's just the reality that we are on the losing side and we have less leverage to pull. I think in the long game that Armenia will be playing in this case is going to be to use the international institutions against Azerbaijan. They're already filing cases with the European Court of Human Rights, the UN courts, and obviously they're lobbying with the Russians, who are the ones who have the actual leverage in this issue. So in the long term, I think that this is going to look very bad for Azerbaijan, especially because the Azeris keep announcing that they want to try the prisoners as common criminals rather than prisoners of war. And you don't need a law degree to know that this is an absolute violation of the Geneva Convention. And because the Geneva Convention very explicitly mentions combatants, uniformed combatants, whether they are from a breakaway state or a foreign invading army, or whatever way you want to define these people, they are absolutely combatants, and they are protected by the Geneva Convention. And I think the Geneva Convention is one of those international agreements that most countries abide by, for the obvious reason that they don't want this to happen to their own prisoners of war.
Rafi,
So Azerbaijan is not helping itself in this case.
Another topic that was discussed, another issue, is the development of the Nakhichevan-Azerbaijan corridor area. What is your reaction to that? What is the mood? What is the reaction of Armenians in Armenia to that move?
So the biggest reaction right now is confusion, because it wasn't clear from the get-go what that corridor would look like. As most people may remember, the initial negotiations in 1996, 1997 also called for some sort of corridor through Merli that would connect Nakhichevan with Azerbaijan. And so some people are referring to that, although Nikol Pashinyan has said that in no way will this be an exchange of sovereignty. In other words, they will not be giving a corridor of land to Azerbaijan. What it will most likely look like will be Armenia would be in charge of renovating that section of the old Soviet highway that cuts Syunik, longitudinally, and Azerbaijani cargo traffic will have freedom to cross it without paying customs fees. So they will be crossing through Armenian sovereign territory, but they will have the right to go from Azerbaijan to Azerbaijan. But there is a segment of the population who sees this as a treasonous act for some reason that I cannot understand, because I can only see there are many more positives to this than there are negatives. I mean, some of the negatives, just to talk about them now, and one of the things that aren't clear would be things like jurisdiction. So if this is part of Armenian sovereign territory, let's say an Azeri truck driver crashes into an Armenian school bus and kills kids or something, will that Azeri truck driver be tried in Armenia or in Azerbaijan? There are all these little legal questions that might have very unforeseen outcomes that should be clarified. But the positives are much higher. I mean, we're talking about Armenia potentially having direct links, trade links now to Russia and Iran, which are two of Armenia's biggest trade partners. And we're unblocking a lot of Armenia's trade potential, which for 30 years has been under embargo. But Nakhichevan is also a faster route to Sunik from Yerevan. So it's not just trade from Armenia to Russia and Armenia to Iran, but this might also benefit intra-Armenian trade, because Sunik is so mountainous that in Soviet times, actually, the trucking used to go south through Nakhichevan, which is much flatter.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So the economic potential for Armenia is really game-changing.
Rafi, your background is, let us say, unique, very unique, because you grew up in Canada, then you moved to Armenia, and in your writings also you encourage people to come to Armenia, work in Armenia, invest in Armenia, share their skills in Armenia. I guess you're an ideal person to talk about that, repatriation or helping Armenia in Armenia. What can you tell young members who are entertaining but not very sure if that will be the right decision?
Well, to them, I say, come and find out for yourselves. I mean, we live at a unique time right now where you're probably familiar with the stories of the repatriations of the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah.
Right, where many people sold all their belongings, got on ships, went to Georgia, into a country they were not technically from. They knew nothing about. They didn't know the dialect. They had never seen. They had no contact with, and they did it. They all got onto boats and they went there anyway. And then they would, I heard stories from my grandparents, well, my mother really, where relatives who had arrived would send a postcard or a family picture, and they were coded where if they're standing up it means that everything is terrible, if they're sitting down it means it's great, you should come to trick the Soviet censors. Of course in 2020 you have none of that. First of all, you don't have any KGB, which is already pretty good.
Were they sitting or standing? You didn't tell us.
Oh, they were standing. I mean, my grandfather never went there, did he? But you have high-speed fiber optic internet. You have cheap flights to half of the capital cities of Europe, and soon maybe we'll have direct flights to Los Angeles. There's no reason not to try it. I mean, after the COVID pandemic has, first of all, changed the way we work. We're all working from home now. We're working remotely. Like, you can't tell from the window that I'm not in Armenia right now, but I could have just told you I was. You wouldn't have known, and I'm sure many people who work at IBM or Facebook or whatever can tell their employers that they're in, that they're in Silicon Valley, but really they're facing Mount Ararat. So you can come and try it out for a week, for a month. And there are many other ways to incorporate or to include yourself into the society here. I mean, there's the American University of Armenia that you mentioned earlier that gives University of California degrees, both undergraduate and master's degrees.
Yeah.
That's one excellent way to plug yourself into the social pipeline, is by going to school with your local compatriots. You can volunteer, you can do internships. There's so many ways to dip your toe in the water before you want to make a major move. But as I say, I mean, Yerevan especially has nothing to envy any of the major capitals of Central or Eastern Europe. It's a very comfortable place to live with a relatively high standard of living, and your buck goes a long way. And also your presence is encouraging to many of the locals when they find out that people from, Paris or New York or Montreal deliberately made the choice to live in Yerevan. They might be more inclined to see the value of what they have. But also, I just want to maybe tie this into another point. When we talk about the war, and many people in the diaspora feel very disappointed that we lost some territory, it's important to remember that the vast majority of the territory that was handed over was entirely uninhabited.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, we talk about the importance of territory is because it sustains life, it sustains people.
Mhm.
And Armenia isn't the land. The land is consequential. Armenia is the people.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we made a decision in the 90s that we did not want to negotiate, which is fine. But at the same time, we didn't take the other step, which was to enforce the borders of those territories which we have. And enforcing doesn't just mean a strong military. Strong militaries are backed by strong economies. Strong economies are usually free and competitive and innovative, and they're composed of well-educated, dynamic, uh, high-income individuals. So in 1994, we expanded the territory of Armenia for the first time in 800 years. But in the meantime, we decreased the population of Armenia by 900,000 people. That's 900,000 soldiers that weren't on the front line, 900,000 taxpayers that weren't paying taxes, or inventors that weren't inventing robotic technology or whatever. So I think if you care about this place, the most real way you can engage with it is to be here. But of course, I also understand, and it's easy for somebody like me to say, just move here. Everybody can't, if you have a plumbing business in Columbus, Ohio, you can't do that remotely.
Absolutely.
But you can help in other ways. Your help can be a selfish act, like it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be devoted. Coming to Armenia on vacation, and if you enjoy yourself, you've helped Armenia already.
Mhm.
You've spent money here, you've injected capital into the economy, you've exchanged ideas with local people, you brought back memories. And when you go home, you tell your neighbors they should visit. You've done your part just by doing that.
Obviously, tourism is a major industry, one of, if not the most important industry for Armenia. But one thing I want to stress, maybe a teacher or a principal would hear that. I'm very, very happy that each student from an Armenian day school, graduating from Armenian day school, I think all schools make it a must that graduating class visits Armenia. This is a very important thing for graduating class, whether it's eighth graders or 12th graders. The point is to get these kids walk on the land, drink the water, breathe the air, see the people, and get to know that. And there is a special bond that creates at that special stage in life with Armenia.
Because it becomes a real place,
It becomes
which
a
for
real
too
place.
many Armenians, it isn't in the diaspora. Armenia is a concept. And until 1991, of course, that was the default situation because there was no country called
Mhm.
Armenia. But now that there is one, it's imperative that we reconnect and that we resew the ties the bonds that were cut from by genocide and by Bolshevism, and for people to interact with this place. I mean, I think the most shocking thing you end up discovering is how people in Armenia are just like you and me. I mean, there are people who have ambitions. There are people who want to get married. They want to have kids. They want to have a good job. They're worried about
Sure.
the same stuff that everybody else is. They're not. They're not. They're not characters in epic tales of Sasnat Zerers and Kajvartans and things like that. I mean, that's part of it, but they're just real people. You asked a question at one point about Pashinyan's survivability
Yeah.
following the war,
Yeah.
and this is another thing that a lot of people in the diaspora don't connect, because the diaspora disproportionately associates two major political objectives with Armenia: Armenian genocide recognition and Nagorno-Karabakh. But a voter in Armenia obviously also thinks genocide recognition is important. They also think Artsakh is important, but they also think, I don't know, taxation reform is important, and education reform is important, and occupational licensing.
Sure.
Like they have very basic demands from their governments, which anybody else in any other country will want as well.
Sure.
And so they're balancing this issue with a whole bunch of other things. And for many of these people, the reality is in the last 2 years, their standard of living has gone up. In fact, this year, for the first time ever since independence, Armenia is slated to surpass both Georgia and Azerbaijan in terms of standard of living. You know, we had the highest economic growth ever in our 3,000-year-old history last year. And these are all things that people remember, and they also remember what life was like before 2018. Ultimately, the point is that this is a decision for voters to make. I mean, there are many legitimate reasons for people to dislike Pashinyan and not like him, but he is ultimately just a figure, and he's a cog in a wider system. And the important thing for Armenia is the survival of the institutions, the democratic institutions, the constitutional mechanisms, just like any other country, which, as many people in the United States have discovered, are also fragile over there.
Rafi, գրնանք խոսիլ ժամերով, գուզեի պագել այս հացով։
Մեծ հաճույքով։
Հայերենով մեկ խոսքը ուղղե մեր ժողովրդի մտահոգությունը երիտասարդներուն ներքախտի մասին, քաղաքական հարցի մասին, բայց պագման խոսքը։
Okay, Հայաստանը թեր էական է, Արցախը թեր գոյություն ունի, ճիշտ է, գիտեք, կգործնենք, կհաղթենք, բայց կշարունակենք եւ ծեր օգնությամբ կհաջողվենք։ Ուրեմն կխնդրեմ, որ դուք ալ մեկ օր Հայաստան գաք, եթե հնարավոր է հոսալ տեղափոխվիկ, ապրիկ, աշխատանք ստեղծեք կամ գտնեք, ընտանիք մեծացնեք, որտեղ ադե հայ ու էությունը։
Շատ շնորհակալ ենք Rafi, անգերած եւ հաջողություն ձեր գործի եւ քրիչը տալար։
Շնորհակալ եմ։
Հայ հաջողություն։
Ձեզ հաջողություն, շնորհավոր նոր տարի։